Here are some dirty facts about history that they'll never teach you in school. Former US President Lyndon B. Johnson reportedly had a massive Johnson that he was very proud of. He was known to frequently display it in public and even nicknamed it Jumbo. Apparently, when LBJ used urinals, if another guy walked into the bathroom, he'd turn around and shake his hog at the guy while saying, "Have you ever seen anything as big as this?" Eadwig, King of England from 955 to 959, allegedly left his coronation feast to have a threesome with his future wife and her mother. He was only 15 years old at the time. In the early 1900s, King Edward VII had a custom-made love chair. The chair allowed the 300-pound man to indulge in his sexual fantasies without crushing his female partners. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, is notoriously said to have lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave, who died just 11 days after giving birth to Mary. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for more than 30 years until her death in 1851. Part 2. There's an incredibly disturbing reason why female mummies found in ancient Egypt are always far more decomposed than their male counterparts. Because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies, which were often kept hidden for several days until they started to rot. The reason was to discourage the embalmers from engaging in necrophilia with the bodies. In 1899, French President Félix Faure died of a stroke while receiving head from his mistress. Our ancient ancestors definitely had their priorities in check, considering the dildo was invented some 20,000 years before the wheel. During their expedition across America, Lewis and Clark only consumed meat and had terrible constipation as a result. In response to this, they started taking laxative pills made of mercury, and thus left mercury deposits wherever they would relieve themselves along the path. To this day, if you follow the same trail as the core of discovery with a metal detector, you can find all the exact spots where Lewis and Clark baked a keister casserole. When future President JFK was dating Miss Denmark Inga Arvid in the 1940s, the FBI once bugged their room because they thought she was a Nazi spy. Turns out they didn't hear much conversation, but instead just a lot of spicy time. But that's not the crazy part. The reason why the FBI thought Inga was a Nazi spy was because she was Hitler's companion during the 1936 Olympics, and he once described her as the perfect example of Nordic beauty. This means that Hitler and JFK may very well have been Eskimo bros. The first confirmed minor to be executed in the United States was 16-year-old Thomas Granger in 1642, who was sentenced to death for intercourse involving several animals, including a mare, a cow, 2 goats, multiple sheep, 2 calves, and a turkey. Authorities consulted with his parents prior to the execution, and they thought that he would never be able to live this down. All parties agreed it would be best to simply execute him and wash their hands of the whole situation. 4. In her famous diary, Anne Frank originally wrote many explicit details involving her lady parts, menstruation, and pleasuring herself. Her father, Otto, cut those parts out. John Harvey Kellogg, one of the Kellogg brothers who invented breakfast cereal, advocated for sewing silver wires through boys' foreskins to prevent them from masturbating. In 1969, Yoko Ono released a film entitled Self-Portrait, consisting of a 42-minute shot of her husband John Lennon's semi-erect member. Following its initial screening, the film was never shown again. Often referred to as the father of vegetarianism, Sylvester Graham shunned alcohol, white bread, meat, and lust. He popularized whole-grain food products and originally invented the graham cracker in the early 1800s to stop people from masturbating or having sexual desires. In 1851, Graham died of complications from an opium enema at the age of 57. Willem Dafoe has such a massive willy that after filming the 2009 psychological thriller Antichrist, the director had to cut the scene showing Dafoe's member and reshoot it with a body double because it was so large that everyone in the room was confused. But Dafoe wouldn't have fared so well in ancient Greece, since based on historical evidence, back then smaller packages were far more desirable than massive hogs. Large trouser snakes were seen as a sign of lust and degeneracy, while little dinky winkies were seen as a sign of self-control and civility. This is why many Greek statues have tiny schlongs, while evil figures from mythology are often depicted with hammers. French President Félix Faure died of a stroke while receiving head from his mistress. William the Conqueror smashed his nuts so hard on his horse's saddle that it gave him an awful infection which he died from a few weeks later. Priests later tried to stuff his body into a stone coffin that was far too small, causing his corpse to effectively explode. Victor Hugo, author of Les Miserables and The Hunchback of Notre Dame, was a raging sex addict. After his wife got tired of having intercourse with him up to 9 times per day, he slept with so many prostitutes that on the day he died, all the brothels in Paris were closed because so many prostitutes took the day off to mourn him. 2 million people attended his funeral, and Paris experienced a mini baby boom 9 months later. George Washington had such severe hemorrhoids that sometimes he couldn't even ride a horse into battle and had to be pulled on a cart. The Italian painter Raphael, who inspired the name of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, is said to have died from exhaustion brought on by non-stop intercourse with various women. Ancient Egyptians held a fertility festival each year where it was the pharaoh's job to strip down and rub one out into the Nile. Once he finished, men in the crowd were encouraged to step forward and join in, turning the Nile River into one massive circle jerk. Benjamin Franklin reportedly had a big thing for gilfs. He once wrote a long, detailed letter to his friend telling him all the benefits of having an older woman as a mistress. His reasons included they are more thankful for the attention, they're more adventurous than younger women, they are experienced and need not be trained. He was also very clear that the face ages, but the downstairs does not. 1993, Ron Jeremy played Mario in a corno that parodied the video game franchise. It's called Super Hornio Brothers, and Nintendo owns all the rights. Anton von Leeuwenhoek was known as the father of microbiology. The first thing he ever put under a microscope was his own man milk, which led to his discovery of sperm. Before this, there were some rather questionable theories as to how babies were made, including the belief that trouser gravy contained really tiny humans that were transferred to the woman during intercourse. Anton fully expected to see tiny babies in his population paste. When Pocahontas was 12 years old, she would entertain white colonists by doing cartwheels without wearing any clothes. This is actually one of the few things we know about her that's indisputable thanks to so many written accounts. From the 40s to the 70s, many Ivy League colleges, including Yale, Harvard, and Princeton, required all incoming freshmen to have nude photos taken of them. Administrators claimed it was to gauge the rate of diseases like rickets and scoliosis, but many believe the true reason behind them was much creepier. Most of the photos have since been destroyed, but thousands still remain in the Smithsonian's possession. In 1940, Walt Disney hired 11 little people to dress up as Pinocchio and wave to people at the movie's premiere. He left them on a theater balcony with enough food and wine for the day, but there was no way for them to get down. By late afternoon, they had all taken off their thick, sweaty costumes and were naked, drunk, and swearing at innocent parents and their children. This is the horrific result of inbreeding. Born in 1661, King Charles II of Spain was the product of 200 years of incest that intended to strengthen the family line. He was breastfed until the age of 4 and never fully learned how to walk. Before reaching the age of 6, Charles miraculously survived a series of diseases, including chickenpox, measles, rubella, and smallpox. As an adult, he was completely illiterate and could barely chew or speak due to his deformed jaw and enlarged tongue. He was so ugly and disfigured that his own wife was terrified of him. Renowned historians Will and Ariel Durant vividly described him as short, lame, epileptic, senile, and completely bald before 35, always on the verge of death but completely baffling Christendom by continuing to live. His autopsy report revealed disturbing findings, stating that his heart was the size of a peppercorn, his lungs corroded, his intestines gangrenous and rotten. He had a single testicle black as coal, and his head was full of water. During Bill Clinton's sexual affair with Monica Lewinsky, she inhaled his front tail several times while he was talking on the phone with a member of Congress. On one occasion, the president inserted a cigar up Lewinsky's sniz, then put the cigar in his mouth and told her he liked it. During another encounter, Lewinsky was performing on Clinton before his erectoplasm got all over her blue dress. She kept the stained dress as an insurance policy, and it was later used as key evidence against Clinton. During World War I, French prostitutes with severe cases of syphilis charged higher rates than uninfected prostitutes. This was because soldiers infected with syphilis would be removed from the front line. In the 1950s, the KGB tried to blackmail the president of Indonesia by getting him to come to Moscow, where a bunch of women persuaded him to have intercourse with them. When the KGB showed him the footage, the president asked for extra copies, saying the Indonesian people would be proud. NBA legend Dennis Rodman was once on a cruise with his girlfriend when they wanted to try something different in bed. She suggested for Dennis to run and jump inside of her while she was laying down unclothed. This resulted in Dennis shattering his member and pouring blood all over the bed. It was the first of 3 times that he would break his pecker, since once you break it the first time, it becomes way easier to break again. Gouverneur Morris was an important founding father of the United States who wrote the introduction to the Constitution. But he died at the age of 64 after attempting to clear a urinary tract blockage using a whalebone as a catheter. While the practice of marrying your cousin is typically seen as something only done by British royalty or Alabama rednecks, up until the 1900s, virtually no one married complete strangers like we do today. In fact, 80% of all marriages throughout history have been between second cousins or closer. Freddie Mercury was known for his outrageously wild parties throughout the 70s and 80s. In 1978, he threw a party in New Orleans that featured nude waiters and waitresses, naked models wrestling in a mud pit, and dwarves walking around with trays of cocaine strapped to their heads. The butt plug was invented and patented by Dr. Frank Young in 1892. He marketed them as a cure for various conditions including acne, headaches, and insanity. King Charles II of England had a wig made out of the pubic hair of his mistresses. King George IV later attempted to make one of his own but died before he completed it. F. Scott Fitzgerald, author of The Great Gatsby, was once told by his wife Zelda that he had a small package. Feeling inadequate, he confessed this to his friend Ernest Hemingway. So Hemingway told Fitzgerald to meet him in the bathroom, where he took a look at his member and told him it was perfectly fine. In 1999, police were called to Matthew McConaughey's Texas home after his neighbor reported loud music and disturbances. When they arrived, ossifers found the actor playing the bongos while blazed out of his skull and completely naked. He was arrested for possession of marijuana. Many historians believe that the crotch part of medieval armor was enlarged not to make the knight's junk look bigger, but to prevent the pain caused by syphilis when their genitals rubbed against the metal. During the Cold War, the CIA highly considered using condoms as a weapon against Russia. They wanted to drop extra-large condoms that were labeled small on Soviet territory to lower their morale, but the plan was eventually scrapped. King Philip V of Spain and his court were known to play a game that translated to the imperturbable. A bunch of naked men would sit around a table covered by a cloth, while a lady underneath the table would put her mouth around one of their willies. The rest of the players would have to guess who was receiving it, and if their guess was correct, the player who was getting socked would have to leave the game. The game was won by the player who could climax without any of the other players noticing. Apparently, this game was very popular among French nobility in the 18th century. When Blackbeard blockaded Charleston Harbor in 1718, he wasn't seeking gold, but instead demanded mercury. Up until the 20th century, it was widely believed that injecting mercury into the urethra was a cure for syphilis. After a long stay in the brothels of Barbados, most of the men in Blackbeard's fleet were infested with STDs. Thus, Blackbeard captured Charleston Harbor to try and make his male parts feel better. The first ever reliable pregnancy test involved injecting a woman's urine into the skin of a female African clawed frog. If the woman was pregnant, the frog would lay eggs within a few hours. William the Conqueror smashed his nuts so hard on his horse's saddle that it gave him an awful infection which he died from a few weeks later. Priests later tried to force his body into a stone coffin that was far too small, causing his corpse to effectively explode. In the 19th century, doctors would perform pelvic massages to treat hysteria in women. Essentially, women would be finger-banged until they reached hysterical paroxysm, aka climax. But these treatments were often time-consuming and gave many doctors carpal tunnel, thus the vibrator was born. According to a 1992 biography, before she was married to Ronald, Nancy Reagan was known around Hollywood for giving the best head. She was reportedly known as Just Say Yes Nancy and was very popular on the MGM lot for her glucking abilities. Napoleon Bonaparte apparently loved Stinky Beaver. On several occasions, he wrote to his lover instructing her not to wash up before he returned to her. The wife of U.S. President Benjamin Harrison died while he was in office in 1892. 4 years later, Harrison married his dead wife's much younger niece and had a daughter with her. His original adult children, who were around 40 years old at the time, were so disgusted by their father marrying their cousin that they didn't attend the wedding. Legendary artist Jackson Pollock died in a drunken car crash in 1956, along with his passenger Edith Metzger. Legend has it that Edith was found with Pollock's bitten-off wiener in her mouth. In the late 1600s, a serial spanker used to terrorize the streets of London with his spanking tactics. Nicknamed Whipping Tom, the man would assault unaccompanied women by lifting their dresses and spanking their butts while yelling, "Spanko!" Vigilantes dressed as women started patrolling areas where he was known to strike. At least 70 attacks were carried out before Thomas Wallace was captured and confessed to the spankings. Adam West and Frank Gorshin were both kicked out of an orgy once because they refused to stop acting like Batman and the Riddler during it. The man who invented autopilot for airplanes did so in 1916 with the intent of founding the Mile High Club with another man's wife. It was working quite well until someone accidentally bumped into the off switch during the act, causing the aircraft to crash into the Long Island Sound. Both the pilot and passenger were unharmed, but their affair was discovered when they failed to explain why they were both naked when help arrived. According to historians, when Gandhi was in his 70s, he went to the extreme to test his sexual celibacy as part of his religion. He would conduct experiments where he would sleep naked with underage girls and refrain from touching them. Gandhi claimed that these tests were his moral duty. Winston Churchill was a bit of a nudist. He claimed to have some form of skin condition that made clothes uncomfortable for him to wear for long periods of time. When he visited the White House, he once had a conversation with FDR while he was completely naked. The great Harry Houdini once escaped a prison cell while fully nude to show that he wasn't hiding anything to help his escape. But the guards who checked him apparently failed to fully inspect him, since Houdini was hiding the key up his chocolate starfish. Pubic wigs known as merkins were worn by prostitutes as early as the 15th century. The purpose for this accessory was that pubic hair was once considered popular and attractive, but sex workers often shaved their lower parts to avoid pubic lice, and these merkins also helped them cover up signs of STDs from their clients. Early colonizers of the United States commonly used corn cobs as toilet paper, since they were soft, plentiful, and the grooves were quite efficient at getting the job done. The Roman Emperor Elagabalus was only 14 when he assumed power and would often prostitute himself in taverns and brothels. He would frequently stand around naked while swinging his ding-a-ling and would offer vast sums of money to any doctor who could give him a vagina. He was killed at age 19, and his only positive legacy was the invention of the whoopee cushion, which he would use on unsuspecting dinner guests. There's an insane reason why the United States never switched over to the metric system. In 1793, Thomas Jefferson wrote to his friends in France requesting help with adopting a new system of measurement. The French responded by sending a scientist named Joseph Dombey to deliver the standards of measurement for the metric system. However, the ship Dombey was traveling on was eventually knocked off course by a storm and ended up deep in pirate territory. The scientist was soon kidnapped by pirates and imprisoned on the Caribbean island of Montserrat. Unfortunately, Dombey died before they were able to ransom him, so the units of measurement never made it to Jefferson. And that's why America went with yards instead. Some historians credit Cleopatra with inventing the first ever vibrator. She's said to have had a small box or hollowed out gourd filled with angry bees that she would shake and press against her lady parts for her own pleasure. Famous author and poet James Joyce wrote some rather questionable letters to his wife about how much he loved her farts. One excerpt read, "You had an arse full of farts that night, darling, and I effed them out of you. Big fat fellows, long windy ones, quick little merry cracks, and a lot of tiny little naughty farties ending in a long gush from your hole." Sir Isaac Newton was probably on the autism spectrum and perhaps asexual as well. He was apparently so invested in his work that there's no record of him ever dating someone, meaning he most likely died a virgin at the age of 84. The ancient Romans used a plant called silphium as an effective natural contraceptive. Its seeds were shaped like a heart, which is believed to have inspired the traditional heart shape we recognize today as a symbol of love. However, the Romans apparently banged so much that the plant went extinct. An unconfirmed popular urban legend from the 90s states that Marilyn Manson had some of his ribs removed so that he could perform autofellatio. The rumor became so widespread that he had to publicly deny it, saying, "If I really had my ribs removed, I would have been in Playgirl by now." Despite his denial, the rumor still persists to this day. During the Victorian era, masturbation was considered a form of self-abuse that caused a range of physical and mental illnesses from blindness to insanity. To combat this panic, at least 35 anti-masturbation devices were patented to prevent people from touching themselves, including the Jugum penis, a steel ring lined with teeth that jabbed its wearer at the onset of an erection, thereby using pain to train the wearer not to get aroused. England's press erupted in 1726 when a peasant woman named Mary Toff claimed to have given birth to rabbits. Surgeons reportedly delivered several dead litters from her, sparking a media frenzy and fascination from the medical community. Eventually, Toft had no choice but to confess it was a total hoax. She'd been collecting the rabbits and killing them before shoving them up her sniz. The scandal humiliated London's medical elite and ruined the careers of several prominent surgeons as Mary was imprisoned for fraud. Dirty facts about history that they'll never teach you in school, Part 21. After Drew Barrymore posed nude for a 1995 issue of Playboy at age 19, her godfather Steven Spielberg had a response for her. For Drew's 20th birthday, he sent her a quilt with the words "Cover Up" stitched on it. He also included a copy of the magazine with her photos altered by his art department to make her appear fully clothed. In 1828, American artist Sarah Goodridge painted a miniature portrait of her own breasts and sent it to a man she liked. It's considered by historians to be one of the earliest cases of someone sending nudes. After Rasputin's dramatic murder in 1916, it was rumored that his beef bayonet had been severed, preserved, and worshipped by a group of female devotees who claimed it could cure infertility with a single touch. Decades later, a Russian museum began displaying a preserved phallic object in a jar, claiming it was Rasputin's 11-inch Maniconda. The item became famous, but many experts dismissed it as a hoax, most likely a sea cucumber or animal organ. The item is still on display at a sex museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. During McLovin's sex scene in Superbad, actor Christopher Mintz-Plasse had to have his mother present while filming due to legal requirements. The actor was only 17 years old at the time of filming, and California law mandates that a parent or guardian must be on set when a minor is involved in scenes of sexual nature. The U.S. Navy once banned tattoos it considered obscene, leading to a boom of tattoos of nude women on men who didn't want to serve. If they decided to serve later on, they had to have a tattoo artist dress the woman to meet Navy requirements. In 1999, Disney had to recall 3.4 million copies of the children's film The Rescuers because one of the animators inserted a picture of a nude woman into 2 frames of the movie. During the Apollo missions, NASA provided male astronauts with condom-like urination devices available in small, medium, and large sizes. However, due to apparent concerns about personal image, many astronauts opted for the largest size, leading to improper fits and urine leakage. To address this, NASA engineers humorously relabeled the sizes as large, gigantic, and humongous to encourage astronauts to choose the appropriate size. Italian adult film star Cicciolina became famous in 1978 for being the first woman to show her breasts on live Italian television, after which she ran for office while promising voters she'd legalize sex in public and bring an end to nuclear power. She was elected in 1987 and once notably offered to sleep with Saddam Hussein if he agreed to peace talks. She was known to deliver speeches with one breast exposed and incorporate erotic performances into her campaigns. Basketball legend Wilt Chamberlain once claimed that he slept with over 20,000 women, averaging 1.4 women per day for over 40 years. He also admitted that he preferred group sex because he found it far more efficient. While many have questioned the accuracy or practicality of the claim, Wilt stood by it until the day he died, not to brag but to illustrate the emptiness of such a lifestyle, later stating that he would have felt far more fulfilled by deeply loving just one woman. While working on the Nevermind album, there were concerns that the naked baby on the cover might be considered too inappropriate. In response, Kurt Cobain reportedly joked that he'd slap a sticker over the baby's genitals reading, "If you're offended by this, you must be a closet pedophile." The label was uneasy, but Cobain stood firm in his refusal to change it, turning a potential PR nightmare into one of the most iconic album covers in rock history. Decades later, Spencer Eldon, the nude baby featured on the cover, sued the band in 2021 at the age of 30, claiming that the image constituted child sexual exploitation and caused him lifelong emotional distress. Ironically, Eldon had fully embraced the fame in the past, recreating the photo multiple times, even nude, signing autographs, and getting a Nevermind tattoo. His lawsuit, seeking $150,000 from each defendant, was widely criticized and ultimately dismissed the next year due to the statute of limitations. According to David Bowie's ex-wife Angela, she once walked in on David and Mick Jagger naked in bed together after a long night of partying. Angela took it as clear evidence of a sexual encounter, though neither Bowie nor Jagger ever confirmed it. Jagger dismissed the rumor as rubbish, while Bowie avoided commenting on it altogether. In the late 1800s, long before the invention of discrete vibrators, early models were massive mechanical contraptions powered by steam, hand cranks, or foot pedals. These devices were used by doctors to treat what was then diagnosed as female hysteria, a vague and outdated condition believed to cause anxiety, irritability, and sexual frustration. Rock Bitch, a provocative all-women British rock band infamous for their wildly sexualized live shows, had a notorious ritual during their concerts. They'd hurl a golden condom into the crowd, and whoever caught it, regardless of gender, was chosen to join them backstage for a night of uninhibited sexual escapades with the band. A 2003 study found that roughly 1 in 200 men globally share a nearly identical Y chromosome, all tracing back to one common male ancestor who lived about 800 years ago in the Mongol Empire region. The researchers linked this genetic legacy to Genghis Khan, giving the timing, geography, and his notorious reputation for spreading his seed like wildfire across his vast empire. While filming The Wolf of Wall Street, Martin Scorsese originally planned for Margot Robbie's character Naomi to wear a robe during a seduction scene. But Margot insisted on performing the scene naked, arguing that it was more authentic to Naomi's character. She later explained that her body is the only form of currency in this world, and felt the nudity was essential to conveying that dynamic. Scorsese didn't argue with her decision, recognizing that it served to the story. King Tut is the only mummy from ancient Egypt known to have been purposely mummified with an erection, which was accidentally broken off soon after his mummy was discovered. If you had to take a dump back in ancient Rome, forget about privacy. Public latrines contained toilets that were lined side by side with no dividers, as these bathrooms were often social hubs where people would gossip while doing their business. Some latrines could seat over a dozen people at a time, elbow to elbow, making communal defecation a totally normal and accepted part of daily Roman life. Once they were done dropping some cargo, they also had to wipe themselves with a sponge on a stick that everyone shared.